Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, here I'm continuing the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, more specifically in this instance the N64 Turbo Core on MiSTer FPGA, because there is a brand new Turbo Core out there, developed in part by a user on the MiSTer Discords named Corn. That is it, just like the food court on the Cobb Court on the Turbo Core, and this just basically takes Robert FPGA Zoom's boss's work and dials the overclock up another 14 megahertz. And honestly, the results are absolutely outstanding. You're going to be getting more frames in a lot more games. And I'm not sure if this is a shots fired situation against Analogue 3D, beating up MiSTer FPGA in a couple of the tests. Now, I'm not rerunning the comparisons for a little bit because this core definitely needs a little bit more work just to be stable, and it really is pushing at the absolute upper limit of what the DE10 Nano can do. But honestly, the results here are absolutely outstanding. We're going to be checking them out. If we're too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But right off the top is the 60 frame per second Super Mario 64 patch, and playing this on the new Turbo Core absolutely is a smooth experience. You can clearly tell from the footage, so long as you're watching this at 60p, make sure your YouTube settings are correct because sometimes they dial you back to 30p. This is just a smoother, much better performing version of Super Mario 64 than the base ROM. And just be aware though, this patch can definitely be a little bit dicey, whether it's on real hardware or any other place. It can freeze at any random spot, so it's one of those things. It isn't super stable, but as far as a test to show just how much better this new Turbo Core is running, it definitely is something I wanted to check out. And trust me, going from 80 megahertz to 94 megahertz doesn't sound like a lot in our modern era, but for something like the N64, that is a very big performance improvement, and it is a big percentage increase over even 80 megahertz, and definitely a lot larger compared to these stock speeds. And that is the fun thing about these cores. They can be tweaked and articulated, and because everything is open source, a user like Corn can go into Robert's work and just decide he's going to absolutely put a second turbo in there. Now granted, I'm talking more like it's a car than an FPGA core, but the concept kind of stays the same. Now unfortunately though, you'll see here, once Mario gets to the start and we actually go out into the open world, if you select save and continue, unfortunately the game is going to freeze. The music's still going to play, but as of this moment, it's not going to go any further, so do be aware, this patch can definitely be problematic even on real hardware, so it's not something that you're going to want to play all the time. Now the most improved game though, for me at least, has got to be Body Harvest. This thing at stock speeds is absolutely a slideshow. We're talking seconds per frame, not frames per second. And on the N64 Turbo Core, the 80 MHz version, it definitely speeds up. It can still chug a little bit here and there. But I will say on the 94 MHz version, this game is absolutely running smooth, and it is going to be the best way to play this outside of doing something like playing it on the Analogue 3D. Honestly, they're basically par at this point in time. And that is why these overclocks are so important, because some of these games back in the N64 era absolutely prioritized either graphics or the large open worlds compared to the frame rates. And even though we didn't really know what 60 frames per second was a lot of the time back in this era, if you played Body Harvest on an original console in the 90s, you were probably annoyed by the overall frame rate. It just wasn't fast, it just wasn't smooth, and it took what was a very fun game and kind of made it less fun, just based upon the fact that it would not run at a good speed. Now I do want you to be aware though that this core is not the silver bullet to fix everything. Some games actually lock their frame rate because the logic is tied to the refresh rate. So not every single game on N64 is going to see any benefit whatsoever from this. It has to be specific games, and the games that have the high-res modes, at least in my opinion, seem to be benefiting the most. But you leave me a comment down below and you tell me, so far seeing this footage of Body Harvest, how do you feel about it? Because honestly to me, it's absolutely a revelation on just how well this game can run, especially on the new overclock core. And that just makes N64 that much more fun, and it's why I love MiSTer FPGA, just the open source nature of people thinking to themselves, I have an idea, I think we could get it to run better, so let me give it a shot. But here comes the first soundtrack sample to dispel the comment I get all the time again that overclocking changes the speed of the music, and I'll be right back with a lot more. So obviously the audio there is running at its proper speed, but I totally understand where this misnomer comes from, because back in the day of early computing, if you had too fast of a CPU, sometimes games could run too fast, or the audio would sound like it was sped up like Alvin and the Chipmunks. But that's just not something you're ever going to encounter, because the overclocks are just to the components that are going to improve the game speed performance. And you can see here in Body Harvest, absolutely just a smooth experience. So I think I may actually do a video specifically on this on the new Turbo Core. Leave me a comment down below if you want to see that, because sometimes I do game specific videos and sometimes I don't, and this is definitely one that I feel like could use more of a showcase. But if you're looking for one game that just absolutely benefits from the 94 MHz overclock core, Body Harvest is 100% it. This is night and day better. I absolutely love to see it. Now let's move over to a game that gets a slight improvement, but not that much. Conker's Bad Fur Day. This is just a game that always runs slow no matter what you're doing with it, whether you're on Analogue 3D, whether you're on MiSTer FPGA Turbo Core. Even emulation can sometimes be a little bit tricky on this one, and that's just because it's a very late stage game on the N64, and Rare was always doing stuff with the hardware that nobody else did, whether it's custom microcode or other little graphical tricks to make their games look better than everyone else. Unfortunately, it was the N64 era, so a lot of those improvements and a lot of those tricks come at the cost of frame rate, because this was still the era of make the game look as pretty as possible and make sure it runs fast enough to not be a complete disaster, but other than that, not much faster. But you'll see here in the animations on the bridge, you're definitely getting more frames per second, but I just don't think that the actual N64 hardware would be able to overclock high enough to run this game at a proper 60 frames per second. Because remember, overclocks can only be pushed so far. The hardware was made within limits, and even in FPGA, how it is put together, whether it's the actual speed of the FPGA chip on the DE10 Nano or the architecture of the N64, you just can't keep pushing and pushing and pushing to try to get better performance until you break something. Because obviously if you just made a core that overclocked at 200 MHz, you'd be running Conker's Bad Fur Day at 60 frames per second all day long. But the underlying technology of how FPGA works and the underlying technology of how the N64 works would say that 200 MHz would absolutely probably break every single game and probably fail to load like 99% of them. So just remember, overclocks are something you just can't keep pushing. There is an upper limit, just like your CPU on your computer today. Sometimes it's heat, sometimes it's just the efficiency, but it isn't a silver bullet. But even getting 5-10 more frames out of Conker is something I absolutely love to see. Let's move into our second soundtrack sample and our third game to show you, and I'll be right back with more.
The U.S. and Russian presidents revealed today that they are all but ready to conclude talks on the reduction of existing nuclear arsenals and are prepared to ratify the historic agreement that promises to be a giant leap towards world peace in New York City on the 24th.
Give that soundtrack sample because one, the voice acting in Hybrid Heaven is actually quite good, and two, the sound effects on that TV when he's changing channel, absolutely hilarious. A whinnying horse and a bunch of other slapstick stuff. But this is a game that can run in the high resolution mode, and this is what I mean when I say this new overclock core just takes those games and makes them perform that much better, because the high res mode was always fun to look at, but honestly it just didn't have the speed on real N64 hardware to actually be fundamentally useful in most games. Stuff like Legacy of Darkness absolutely I think were ruined by the high-res mode, because yes, it looked a little bit better, but it made the game, in my opinion, pretty close to unplayable. So Hybrid Heaven definitely is a game that people either love or hate. It is very unique, it has a very specific gameplay style, and it is Konami basically experimenting around with the Metal Gear Solid formula, but not with the Metal Gear Solid name. And I personally think the aesthetic of this game, the world building, and the rest of the gameplay do hit for me, but I understand if it's not going to be your type of thing, because the combat in this game is turn-based and it's one of the weirder decisions they made, but this is just going to run better on the 94 MHz core. Now when you are playing around with this, if you notice any weird pixels on your HDMI connection, that might be a bandwidth issue just based upon how fast the core is working versus the silicon lottery on your FPGA chip. But there is no issue when trying to test this out. It's not doing anything that the MiSTer FPGA can't do on the DE10 Nano board. It's just going to be one of the luck of the draw things. big thanks to Andy D for helping with some of the footage this week as well. He had those pixels in a couple of the actual captures, and I tested it on my OLED, and at least for my MiSTer Add-ons build, and I know that MiSTer Add-ons doesn't make the DE10 board itself, I was able to run everything without any pixels, and it's just like overclocking a CPU. I have an Intel i9-12900K, and mine might overclock another 100 megahertz more than yours, just because I won the quote-unquote silicon lottery, because all CPUs can work, but some can just honestly work better than others in the same manufacturing batch. I know it's weird, but it is the truth. But this is where people get tripped up in hybrid heaven. I think this combat is really fun, kind of almost plays like an RPG, and it's one of those things. 3D combat was not dialed in 100% in this era, so I think the developer is actually kicking that out of the game and giving you the turn-based combat did you maybe a favor. I get it, hybrid heaven is definitely an acquired taste, but if you've never played it before, definitely give it a shot. I think there's a lot to love here, and if you are going to play it for the first time, play it on the 94 megahertz core. Now, if you're wondering how to get this, it's going to be on the MiSTer FPGA Discords under the N64 channel. You just have to look for it because it isn't part of the official repo. It's not even part of Robert's GitHub repo. This is just something that was posted to the chat for people to test. Well, let's move over to Beetle Adventure Racing and show you where actually overclocking the CPU can get things into some real weird states. This intro sequence here has always been tricky to get to run correctly, whether it's on Analogue 3D, whether it's on MiSTer FPGA. Really, it only ever does 100% of the right thing on real hardware, but it gets even more out of alignment here. The good thing is the races 100% work and they run faster, and the best part is it's going to be our third soundtrack sample because I love the music in this game. So 35 seconds, I'll come back and talk about just how good Beetle Adventure Racing is. So Beetle Adventure Racing looks great, sounds great, and it definitely performs a lot better even than the 80 megahertz core on MiSTer FPGA. And if there was ever a racing game on N64 that desperately needed better performance, Beetle Adventure Racing would be high up on the list along with San Francisco Rush 2. And this is a prime candidate for a recomp or a PC port, because imagine playing Beetle Adventure Racing in 16:9 at 60 or even 120 frames per second with smooth gameplay and no frame drops, because Beetle Adventure Racing is one of my favorite racing games on N64, and I just love to see it getting better performance and more frames. There's a ton of other games I could have tested, but that's it for this batch of videos. If you want to see a second test, leave me a comment down below and I'll see how this video does before I make that next one, because sometimes I batch things, sometimes they make them one off. But honestly, Corin absolutely nailed it with this new core, 94 megahertz N64 and MiSTer FPGA that rivals or even exceeds in some instances the Analogue 3D. You love to see it. And if you really do want to see an Analogue 3D comparison video, leave me a comment down below. And I'm kind of done comparing things with that console because honestly, some of the comments just get angry. It's like I can't say the two things can be good at the same time without making somebody mad. But go grab this one on the MiSTer FPGA Discords under the N64 channel and go ahead and get your turbo on, because this is straight up absolutely magic in the best way possible. And if you've never played Beetle Adventure Racing, go ahead and give it a little bit of a test drive. Very big dad joke energy there, because trust me, it is absolutely a straight up amazing game. Bye bye.